Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava again. Welcome to Tidbits on Business and Finance with me. With a huge base of highly educated youth and manpower who are willing to take risks of being an entrepreneur, not just because it is in their blood, but also because sometimes there is just no option other than facing unemployment. So with such a situation, together with the fact that India presents a huge domestic market, India should be brimming with very prosperous startups who should have made it big. And then this very youth is so very well competent to interface with the world, is so very well equipped with expertise, and India, at least on paper, has a formidable network of laws, banking, finance infrastructure that more and more Indian startups should be capturing global markets. More and more Indian startups should be what are called unicorns, startups with a market value exceeding $1 billion. The sad fact is that it is not so. Indian startups most of the times are struggling and they are not able to reach their potential. The entire ecosystem is still not geared up to ensure that startups in India are encouraged to reach their potential. In India, at the moment, we have 14,000 registered startups who provide employment to about 140,000 individuals. It is said that merely last year, they provided additional employment to about almost 90,000 individuals. So the base of startups, which is the third largest in the world, this base of Indian startups has been increasing year after year. They are not just in the popular sector of information technology, but they are also there in education, healthcare, something like crime prevention, agricultural technologies, clean energy, and a host of other sectors. So we have a wide base of startups. We don't just have them in information technology and software, but depending on the skill set of the youth willing to be an entrepreneur, willing to start it out on his own, those kind of technologies are there and there's a market for all of them in India. The fact still remains is that the kind of growth that they ought to have is not taking place. And the reason for this primarily is, and they are interconnected, the Indian startups suffer from lack of capital to scale up operations, but the capital doesn't come in so easily because the appropriate ecosystem is missing. The government is seized with this reality. The government has been trying to attract VC funds, venture capital funds from abroad to invest in Indian startups. It is said that the government of India has connected with over 100 big venture capital funds globally, not just those based in the US, but also those in Hong Kong, Singapore, China, Dubai, Saudi Arabia. So the government has been keen to attract capital into Indian startups from VC funds from the overseas capital markets. It in fact even arranged a summit for startups for the global investors in Goa very recently. The response of the foreign investors was lukewarm. And this is despite the fact that every investor worth his salt today believes that India is the market of the future, which they cannot ignore. Every investor in the world today believes in India as a market and as one of the key markets of this century. But despite that, investors have been cautious. This caution of investors has to do with the lack of a suitable ecosystem for startups in India. It starts with the fact that the government, more than being a facilitator, tends to be an obstacle that puts hindrances in the path of the dynamism of startups. And a host of factors emanate from there. Startups in India face corruption, they face red tapeism, they face multiple window clearances. The corporate laws are very complex and harsh. Taxation laws are draconian. There are enough reasons to distract a startup entrepreneur from his basic function and get entangled into these legal processes. There are hundreds of startups in India today who have received funds from investors at attractive premiums, and the income tax department has sent notices taxing the premium received, which is never an income in the hands of a startup. In nobody's hands can share capital and the premium be an income. But hundreds of startups are facing tax demands, huge tax demands, because of these frivolous taxation claims put in by the income tax department. It not only saps the cash flow, the operating cash flow of these startup enterprises, but it also distracts the attention of the entrepreneur and also discourages them. It has been one of the factors where our very talented, vibrantly dynamic startup entrepreneurs have chosen to shift base abroad than be in this kind of an environment in India. So the fact is, we don't have an ecosystem that attracts, that facilitates, that encourages the continuity, setup and prosperity of startups. The entire ecosystem needs a change, and it has to start with the government. It is a government which presents, it is a government's functionaries which present startups with corruption, with red tapeism, with insensitivity to their problems, with huge compliance costs, with penalties and prosecutions which are frivolous and which can be avoided, and it is they who stifle the startups. And it is this environment that needs to change. And if it changes, you can be sure the government will not need to go to VC funds. They will come on their own. Every VC fund is looking for a lucrative investment opportunity. India is a domain they are always looking into, but it is this factor which acts as a hindrance. So if the government rectifies itself, especially at the ground level, the senior bureaucrats and the ministers always like to make very encouraging statements. They never translate to the ground level, to the level of the lowest clerk down the line, the lowest peon down the line. And because that doesn't happen, nothing that is intended gets delivered. And till that doesn't happen, you can be sure our talented startup entrepreneurs will prefer to be abroad rather than be in India. Last year, speaking at a seminar at Kolkata, the American Consul General actually remarked that Indian startups prefer California to Bengaluru. That speaks it all. What we lack is a suitable ecosystem for startups. And if the government is keen to attract and ensure that our startups meet the kind of potential they deserve, it needs to cure the ecosystem, and that will start from the door of the government at the very inception. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.